Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday morning devotional brought to you by Golden Isles Primitive Baptist Fellowship and Heart Floss TV. Good to see you this morning. I'm Vernon Eckleberry, and in a moment I'll have a message for you entitled Crossing the Finish Line. Crossing the Finish Line. But first, here's Brenda to sing The Last Mile of the Way. We invite you to sing along and pay particular attention to that first stanza because it fits our theme this morning regarding Paul's testimony as he approaches in his life the last mile of the way. But his focus is on the finish line. Now here's Brenda. Thank you, Brenda. When I've gone the last mile of the way. Well, that's kind of Paul's testimony here as he approaches his end, but yet it is with joy. As a matter of fact, the book of Philippians might have as its theme joy, because that word is used 6 times at least by Paul in this epistle. As the end draws near, Paul shares the reason that obstacles and setbacks never held him back on all of his missionary journeys. He uses the analogy of a runner in the Olympic Games to illustrate how it is that he persevered through all that he faced along the way. Number 1, Paul never assumes that he has finished the race until he crosses the finish line. Now listen to this, and I'll read to you the entirety of our text from chapter 3 of Paul's epistle to the Philippians, beginning at verse 13. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling in Christ Jesus. So Paul's life is compared to a runner in this epistle, and he uses that analogy to explain how it is that he went ahead, persevering through all of the things that he faced without turning back or without being sidetracked or immobilized along the way. And as I said, Paul never assumed that he had finished the race until he crosses the finish line. 13. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended. Now that word apprehended in the original means to have accomplished or to have finished, to have completed. And Paul, even though he is approaching his own end in this life, as the death sentence has apparently been issued, he says, I still haven't finished. It's still not over. For Paul, only his impending execution, only the fulfilling of that sentence will signify that he is through, that he has passed the finish line, so to speak. He told Timothy in 2 Timothy 4:6, I am now ready to be offered, and the time of my departure is at hand. And he says, I fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. And so Paul says that even though he's in a prison cell here, even though he has been taken away from his travels, and of course we know that he went to Rome by choice, so that he could make a point before Caesar, and also so that he could carry the gospel even to Caesar's own household. And so we find that even while he's in bonds, the work continues. He's not through. He hasn't finished yet. And so he never assumes that it's over until, as Yogi Berra said, it's over. Even in prison, he says in the 1st chapter, I would have you to understand, brethren, that the things which happened unto me have fallen out rather unto the furtherance of the gospel, so that in my bonds in Christ are manifest in all the palace. And that is Caesar's court. He was testifying and preaching the gospel in Caesar's own household. So Paul then, to successfully run the race to completion, never assumes that he has finished the race until he crosses the finish line. But secondly, Paul refuses to be hindered by the past. And this is oh so important. And you remember, Paul had many things that he might have regretted or been sorry for, especially before he was converted. And he had many things that could have caused him bitterness. But Paul refuses to be hindered by the past. And this is in verse 13. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind. The greatest impediment to achieving a goal is looking back, always looking back over our shoulder. For a runner, that accomplishes nothing and only gives the advantage to the competition. Of course, it's impossible to forget the past altogether. Some memories even serve us well. But Paul here means that he does not let the past impede his present journey. He's not always looking over his shoulder and wondering, what if I would have done this? Or regretting that he didn't do the other. He is not held back by what's already gone before. He's not bearing a lot of emotional baggage, so to speak. So Paul refuses to be hindered by the past. But the third reason for his success in finishing the race that is set before him, Paul concentrates on what lies ahead. He's not held back by what's behind, and also he concentrates solely on what lies ahead. Verse 13 again. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended or reached the finish line yet, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before. And that means in the original straining toward. It's like a runner. Have you ever noticed that as they approach the tape, the finish line, they're leaning forward to get just a little advantage in the time and over the opponent. So humans are not chameleons. We don't have the ability to look in two directions at one time. We must choose whether to look forward in our journey or to always be looking behind us. James said that a double-minded man, that is a man that's trying to look in two directions, is unstable in all of his ways. By concentrating on what lies ahead, Paul can move forward and he leaves the past behind. But moving successfully forward requires a target. You need to be reaching forth toward something. And so Paul keeps his eye on the prize. What waits for him there at the finish line? He said in verse 14, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So Paul has something to press on toward, and that is completing the purpose to which God called him. That's the prize at the end of the way. That's what he calls finishing the course in his letter to Timothy, when he said, I've fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. That is, I have completed that for which God put me in this world, and the calling that he called me to. And faithfully finishing the race will never win for one eternal salvation. That's only through the grace of God, by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on Calvary. But faithfully finishing the race brings to humans the greatest prize that we can ever achieve. And that is the commendation of our Lord when we reach the end of the way, when we reach life's finish line. Paul again said to Timothy, or wrote to Timothy, "Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day." And that's a reference to the laurel that is planted on the on the winner's head as he crosses the finish line. Now, that doesn't mean that we're in a contest with other believers. We run against those things that would hinder us, that would hold us back, that would sidetrack us, that would make us to give up on the race altogether. We race against those things. And when we defeat all of those things, when we're able to keep focused on the future and not allow life to sway us off the course that God has put before us, then, you see, we can be assured that the race is won when we cross the finish line. Well, that brings us to the close then of our text, in which we looked at the reaching the finish line and why Paul successfully reached it. "Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended," that is, he never felt like he had finished until it was finished. Some people say, "Well, I've reached such and such an age, so it's over. Now my calling, now my service to the Lord," but that's not it. We'll know when it's over, as Paul knew when it was over, when he crossed the finish line. And he says, "This one thing I do," he forgets those things which are behind. He doesn't allow past things to hinder him. Reaching forth to those things which are before, he looks ahead at the road, not behind. And he is able to focus on that which is ahead of him by pressing toward the mark, that prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. And that is fulfilling our purpose for which God calls us into his kingdom. And now, may God be with you until we meet again.